My family pressured me to be the perfect child. When I broke free from their control, they tried to ruin my life, but what I did next left them in shock. There are times in life when you don't know how you got to where you are. Like, one moment, you're living what feels like a decent, well-adjusted life, and then the next, you're sitting in your old bedroom at 35, wondering how you let your parents get this much control over you. I thought I'd broken free a dozen times, that I'd learned to stand up for myself, but somehow, I always ended up back here. Or, well, maybe I kept coming back, hoping things would finally change. It was just another Sunday dinner at my parents' house in Houston. I sat at the end of the grand mahogany table, which had been in the family since I was in diapers. It was the kind of dining table meant for 6 people, but only 3 of us lived close enough to make these family dinners happen: me, my parents, and Graham. Lacey, my sister, lived far away in Portland, and I envied her for it every single time we sat down to one of these meals. My mother, Mary Ann Holt, was at the head of the table, setting down a carefully prepared salad like it was the crown jewel of the evening. Everything was pristine. Not a crumb out of place on the white lace tablecloth. She'd always been a perfectionist, our mom, and every meal she made was another way for her to remind us that nothing short of absolute perfection would ever be tolerated in this family. "Derek, pass the bread," she said, not looking up as she positioned the salad tongs just so. She never did look directly at me when she spoke. I was just the older son, the one who'd never quite lived up to her standards. She didn't have to say it, her eyes did all the talking, like she could see right through to every failure I'd ever had. "Sure, Mom." I handed her the bread basket, doing my best to smile and make the interaction painless. I'd perfected this silent, polite act over the years: say as little as possible, make no waves, don't provoke her. But that night, I must have been slipping. Maybe I was tired, or maybe I just wasn't in the mood for her unspoken criticisms. My mind drifted, thinking about the week ahead, another round of late nights, editing ad campaigns for a tech firm that didn't value creativity so much as efficiency. My job was safe, decent money, but I hated every second of it. I'd once had dreams of opening my own design studio, doing real art, but life and bills had other ideas. "So, Derek," she said, spearing a piece of lettuce. "Are you still doing graphics?" There it was. I could almost hear the disdain dripping off the word. Graphics, like it was some kind of hobby I'd taken up instead of a career. I could feel Graham's eyes on me across the table. He knew what was coming. He always did. "Yes, still doing graphics, Mom," I replied as neutrally as I could, giving her a tight smile. "Actually, we just landed a big contract with Toyota." "Oh, Toyota, how wonderful," she said, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Though it's funny, isn't it, that Graham just got promoted to senior manager at his firm? Isn't that wonderful, Graham?" Graham, who was nursing his drink, looked down and shrugged, clearly uncomfortable. "Yeah, thanks, Mom. It's a nice step up." "Well, it's more than a step, honey," she laughed, a bit too loudly. "My 2 boys, one's practically running the place, and the other is doing graphics." I clenched my fists under the table, trying not to let the comment sting as much as it always did. But damn it, it stung. Every time. "You know, Mom," I said slowly, the words coming out before I could stop them, "it's a real job. And I'm good at it." She gave me a look, the kind only mothers can perfect. Of course, Derek. It's just that you could have done so much more if you'd gone into a serious field. Finance, law, or business," I interrupted, my voice colder than I intended. "Like Graham." "Yes." She didn't even flinch at my tone, just took it in stride. "And you know, with your brains, you could have done so well in something stable. A field with growth and respectability." I could feel the tension rise around the table. My father, Charles, was eating in silence as he always did, a passive participant in our family dramas, never willing to risk his peace by speaking up. But tonight, something in me snapped. "Stable? Respectable?" I echoed, my voice rising. "Is that what this is about, Mom? That my job doesn't fit your ideal image of success?" Her eyes widened slightly, like she was surprised I dared to challenge her. "Derek, I'm only saying that I worry about you. You're 35, and you're still working in graphics. You should be settling down, thinking about your future." "Mom," Graham interjected softly, but she waved him off, turning her attention fully to me. "Derek, honey, I just want what's best for you," she continued, her voice dripping with forced sweetness. "Your brother is a shining example of what hard work and dedication can achieve, and you've chosen a different path. But that doesn't mean you can't change course." "I don't want Graham's life," I said, my voice barely a whisper. The room went silent. Even my father looked up from his plate, surprised. Mary Ann's face hardened. "Well, maybe you should." Graham gave me an apologetic look, mouthing sorry across the table, but I couldn't stay in that room another second. I pushed back my chair and left, ignoring the shocked silence that followed me. As I sat in my car outside, my phone buzzed. It was my sister, Lacey. You all right? She texted. Family dinner, I replied. You know how it is. Been there. Call me later? Yeah. Lacey was the only one in the family who got it. She'd escaped the clutches of our parents' expectations by moving to Portland years ago, living her own life, working as a photographer, and scraping by on her own terms. She was free, in a way I'd always envied. But I hadn't called her in a while. We didn't talk as often these days. I couldn't bring myself to burden her with my drama, not when she'd finally found her peace. But later that night, when I got home, I did call her. And to my surprise, she picked up immediately. Derek. You all right? Barely, I laughed, rubbing my eyes. Mom went on her usual tirade about my job. I think I actually yelled back this time. Seriously? Wow, I would have paid to see that. Her laugh was a relief, like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. It was a mess. She just kept comparing me to Graham, like I haven't heard that 1,000 times already. Sounds like you've had enough, finally. Her tone softened. Listen, Derek, this is going to sound weird, but I need to tell you something. What's up? There was a pause, a long, heavy one. I'm actually thinking of moving back to Houston. What? Why? The words came out sharper than I intended. Lacey moving back would be like throwing her into the lion's den. Lost my job, she said quietly. Can't make rent. I thought maybe if I moved back in with Mom and Dad, just for a bit, I could get back on my feet. Lacey, no. Don't do that to yourself, I warned her. You'll be back in the same prison you left all those years ago. Maybe, but it's different now. I'm different, she said, though her voice wavered. Besides, I can't keep depending on friends. I need a stable place until I can save up again. Fine, but you can't stay with Mom and Dad. I was pacing now, my chest tight. I'll find you a place. You can stay with me if you have to. Derek. She began, but I cut her off. No, Lacey. Don't give in to them, not like I did. They'll just make you feel like crap, like you're wasting your potential, like you're nothing unless you fit their idea of success? She finished, her voice trembling. Yeah, I muttered. Like that. We talked for a while longer, our conversation dipping into shared memories of growing up with parents who demanded more than we could ever give. I promised to help her find a place, to keep her out of their grip, and I meant it. I was determined not to let her fall back into the same trap. The next day, I went to work, thinking I could put the whole fiasco behind me. But life had other plans. Around midday, I got a call from my boss. Apparently, someone had reached out to him, questioning my reliability and commitment. It didn't take a genius to figure out who was behind it. My mother had connections in the business world, people she could call to check up on me, to guide me in the right direction, as she saw it. She'd done it before, making suggestions to my bosses, subtly hinting that I wasn't serious about my work. And this time, she'd managed to jeopardize my job. When I confronted her later that night, she didn't even deny it. I was just worried about you, she said, looking up at me with that innocent expression. You're 35, Derek. You need stability, not some art project. Are you kidding me? I yelled, my hands trembling. You sabotaged me, your own son, because you didn't like my career? Derek, you've been floundering for years. I only did it to push you in the right direction. For once, listen to me. I know what's best for you. No, Mom, I said, my voice hoarse. You have no idea who I am or what I want. You never did. The silence that followed was crushing. I walked out of the house, out of their lives, and for the first time, I felt free. Truly free. I moved to New Orleans soon after, taking a job at a local art studio. Lacey eventually joined me, and we built a life outside our parents' expectations. And in that freedom, we found ourselves. Months later, my mother tried to reach out, claiming she wanted to make amends. But by then, I was done. I'd finally broken free, and I wasn't going back. Leaving Houston wasn't easy, but it was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders the moment I set foot in New Orleans. I'd been coming here since my 20s, weekend trips to get away, to taste freedom without anyone breathing down my neck. The place had always felt like a second home, a hidden pocket where I could escape and just be me. So, when I finally left Houston for good, I didn't hesitate. I took my savings, found a small apartment in the Marigny district with big windows and creaky floors, and I started over. And for the first time, I wasn't Derek Holt, the perfect child who failed his parents' impossible standards. I was just Derek. I took a part-time gig at a local art gallery that supported young artists, helping with exhibitions and marketing. I poured everything into my work, creating art in the evenings, meeting local creatives who'd never even heard of my family and didn't care where I came from. They just saw me, and that was enough. Lacey joined me a few months later, just as we'd planned. She'd managed to save enough to cover her half of a down payment on a little shotgun house just a few streets over from mine. After all those years of seeing her only for holidays and sporadic family events, we got a second chance to actually know each other as adults, without the looming shadow of our parents hanging over us. Life was good. And then, my mother got in touch. It started with messages. At first, they were short, curt little texts every few weeks. Hope you're well. Call your mother. Then they became more persistent. Derek, why are you avoiding me? We need to talk. After I ignored her for months, my father left a voicemail. His tone was flat, almost apologetic. Derek, son, it's your mother. She isn't doing so well. She says she needs to speak to you. I think you should consider it. But even that wasn't enough to convince me to reach out. I was done playing their game. I didn't owe them my peace or my happiness. Then one day, Lacey came by, her face pale and her lips set in a hard line. She sent me a message, too, she said, showing me her phone. Marianne's message was the longest I'd ever seen her write. Lacey, if I've wronged you and Derek, I am sorry. But I am not well. The doctors don't know how long I have left. I would like to make peace, at least before it's too late. Lacey sighed, dropping her phone on my coffee table. She's sick, Derek. I know it's complicated, but... Are you seriously thinking of going back? I asked, surprised. No, she said firmly. But I do think we should hear her out. I wrestled with the idea for days. Finally, I agreed, though not for forgiveness. I wanted closure. I wanted her to know that, sick or not, I wasn't running back to make her feel better about the life she'd tried to ruin. We went together. We arrived at the house that had once felt like a prison, and it was eerie how much smaller it felt, as if time had worn down its grandiosity along with Marianne. She was sitting in the living room, looking more fragile than I'd ever seen her. Her hair had thinned, and her skin had taken on a grayish hue, but her eyes were still sharp, still assessing me as if she was picking me apart. Derek. Lacey, she said, forcing a small smile. Thank you for coming. I didn't respond. I wasn't here for pleasantries. So, I said, crossing my arms. What do you need, Mom? Why the sudden need to reach out? Her eyes flickered with something, maybe regret, but it quickly vanished. I'm dying, Derek. The doctors say I have a matter of months. I wanted to make amends. To fix things before it's too late. I scoffed, unable to hold back. Amends? You think an apology will fix this? Years of controlling every part of my life, sabotaging my career, making me feel like a failure. Derek, she interrupted, her voice barely a whisper. Please. I did it all because I loved you. I wanted you to be successful, to be the best version of yourself. No, I shot back. You wanted me to be the best version of yourself. And when I didn't fit your idea of success, you tore me down, every chance you got. Lacey put a hand on my shoulder, but I shrugged it off, too angry to stop now. You tried to ruin my life, Mom. And now, just because you're sick, I'm supposed to forgive and forget? Just let it go? Her face fell, and for the first time, she looked genuinely sad. But it was too late. She let out a long sigh. I know I can't undo what I did, Derek. But I hoped we could move past it. Move past it? I repeated, shaking my head. You've got to be kidding me. With that, I turned and walked out of the house. Lacey hesitated, her gaze torn between me and our mother. Eventually, she followed me out, closing the door softly behind her. We didn't say much on the drive back. I was furious, but I also felt a strange sort of calm. I'd faced her, finally told her what her actions had cost me, and I didn't feel guilty. For once, I wasn't carrying that weight. Weeks passed, and I thought the chapter was closed. But Marianne's sickness progressed faster than expected. One morning, I got a call from my father. She'd passed away in the night. At the funeral, I felt oddly detached, watching the people she'd considered worthy of her time come to pay their respects. It was a short, cold affair, reflecting the life she'd built, more about appearances than genuine connection. Afterward, we learned that Marianne had left everything to Graham in her will. The house, the family investments, everything. Not that I cared about the money, but it was the final insult, the last piece of control she thought she could wield over us, even in death. But what she didn't know was that I'd prepared for this. I'd anticipated it. And I had my own plan. You see, in the months since moving to New Orleans, I'd been working on my art. I poured every ounce of pain and betrayal into it. My pieces were raw, sometimes dark, depicting the weight of expectation, the suffocation of trying to live up to someone else's idea of who you should be. A few months before she died, a gallery owner had stumbled upon my work at a small art show in the French Quarter. She loved it, thought it was hauntingly beautiful. She offered to feature my work in an exhibition, and it took off. So, in the end, I got the last word. I dedicated my first solo exhibition to those who suffocate the dreams of others for their own satisfaction. It was a direct, unapologetic response to everything my mother had put me through. My pieces sold out, and my work gained a bit of a following, enough to make a name for myself, enough that people asked me about the inspiration behind it all. I didn't shy away from the truth. I told them exactly where the inspiration came from. And in that moment, with my own work, I finally cut the last tie that bound me to her expectations. I reclaimed my life and shared my story on my terms, finally free to be the person I wanted to be. That was my revenge. Not in anger or bitterness, but in creating something real, something meaningful, from the ashes of her control.